It all started with a knock at my door on a quiet Saturday morning. I had just moved into the neighborhood a few weeks ago, looking for peace, privacy, and maybe a friendly wave or two. What I didn't expect was a clipboard-wielding woman with a forced smile and the kind of energy that screamed control. She introduced herself as Karen, the self-proclaimed president of the local HOA. And before I could even finish my coffee, she was already telling me about dues, paint colors, and mailbox regulations. The problem? I didn't buy into an HOA. There was nothing in my deed, no paperwork, no obligation. I calmly explained that, thanked her for stopping by, and closed the door. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I noticed her watching from her window every time I stared. Left the house. Then came the passive-aggressive notes on my windshield. And just when I thought things couldn't get any weirder, she called the cops claiming I was trespassing on HOA property. That's when things took a sharp turn. I stayed calm, stepped outside, wallet in hand, and when the officer approached, I pulled out my badge. Yep, turns out Karen picked the wrong target. I wasn't just another new neighbor. I was a federal agent with more years of law enforcement experience than she probably had HOA rules. The look on her face, priceless. She froze like a deer in headlights. But this story doesn't end there, because what I uncovered next about this so-called HOA was way bigger than petty rules and neighborhood drama. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was hiding something. And once I started asking the right questions, it all began to unravel. Stick around because this story is just getting started. After that moment on my front lawn, Karen, speechless. It's the officer trying to figure out how this all spiraled so fast. I expected things to cool down, but instead, they escalated. I figured she'd back off once she realized who she was dealing with. I wasn't there to start trouble. I just wanted to be left alone. But Karen? She took my refusal to join her HOA like a personal attack. Over the next few days, weird things started happening. My mailbox got knocked over. Trash bins that weren't mine ended up in my yard. I caught her walking past my property at night, holding her phone up like she was recording. At first, I brushed it off. Neighborhood drama, maybe a little intimidation. But something felt off. Too calculated, so I did what I'm trained to do. I looked up the HOA, she claimed, to run. No official registration, no bylaws filed with the county. No board members. It was like it didn't even legally exist. Just a few printed pamphlets, a homemade website, and Karen parading around like she ran a tight ship. That's when the pieces started falling into place. I talked to a few neighbors quietly. Most didn't want to get involved, but the ones who did, they had stories. Fines for invisible violations. Threats about liens on homes. One guy said his application to repaint his house was denied by Karen, even though there wasn't a single rule in writing. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just about power. It was about money, control, and fear. Karen had built something shady, wrapped it in official-looking paper, and bullied people into going along with it. But I still didn't know how deep it went, or what she was trying so hard to hide. And the more I uncovered, the more dangerous it started to feel. The more I looked into this so-called HOA, the stranger things became. I started documenting everything: dates, photos, even conversations. Every time Karen left a note or made a new demand, I saved it. But I wasn't just focused on wanted to understand how she'd managed to keep this facade going for so long. That's when I noticed something odd. Almost every home on the block had a little green sticker in the corner of the window. Mine didn't. I asked a neighbor about it, and he just mumbled something about keeping the peace and quickly changed the subject. That's when I knew people were afraid of her. Then I met Ray, an older guy who lived 2 streets down. He invited me over after seeing me walking past his yard. His house was run down, yard overgrown, but he seemed sharp. Over coffee, he told me Karen had tried to evict him 3 years ago. No court documents, no legal filings, just threats, harassment, and a forged violation letter that looked official. He fought back, but ended up isolated by the rest of the act. Neighborhood, no one would talk to him after that. He showed me his records, photos, letters, even recordings. That's when I saw Karen's handwriting match up with several board signatures. At this point, it became clear Karen wasn't just enforcing fake rules. She was running an illegal HOA operation, scaring people into compliance and possibly profiting from it. But how? And who else was helping her? I started noticing a pattern. Every time someone resisted, their home was suddenly hit with a series of violations: paint color, grass height, fence repair. And then, a man named Tom from a supposed maintenance company would show up offering to fix it for a price. I followed him one day and saw him park behind Karen's house. He wasn't just maintenance, he was part of whatever this was. But I had to be careful now. The more I uncovered, the more eyes I felt on me. Karen wasn't acting alone, and whatever they were hiding, they were willing to protect it. I knew I was getting close when Tom stopped showing up during the day. I'd see his truck parked a few blocks over late at night, lights off, engine running. Once, I spotted him crouched near my driveway, pretending to check something on his phone when I turned on my porch light. The message was clear, they knew. I was digging, and they didn't like it. That's when I decided to go deeper. I pulled property records on Karen's house and surrounding lots. One jumped out immediately. The small parcel of land behind her property, technically a utility easement, was listed under a Shell LLC. No contact name, no phone, just a P.O. box in another state. The funny thing, that land was what Karen claimed as community property, managed by her fake HOA. The same land she used to justify fines and threats of trespassing. I started thinking this wasn't just about control. There was money flowing somewhere. I dug further into county filings and found something buried in the zoning history. An abandoned development proposal from years ago that would have increased the value of that utility parcel if maintained properly. Was Karen trying to claim that land to flip it later, using fake HOA rules to make it look legitimate? Meanwhile, neighbors started acting strange. One woman, who had smiled and waved at me for weeks, suddenly stopped making eye contact. Another neighbor, younger guy named David, pulled me aside and whispered that someone had warned him not to talk to me. I asked who, and he just shook his head and said, "It's not worth it, man." That night, I came home to find a letter taped to my front door. No envelope, just a message in bold print: "Back off. Last warning." No signature, but I didn't need one. What Karen didn't know is I'd already looped in someone from my agents, so quietly. The evidence was stacking up, and I was close to pulling the thread that could unravel everything. But I had to be smart. The moment I made one wrong move, they'd either shut it all down or come after me directly. And then, just before dawn, I caught someone on camera in my backyard. I didn't sleep that night. The footage from my backyard camera looped over and over in my mind. The figure was wearing a hoodie, moved slow, deliberate, like they weren't just passing through. They weren't trying to break in. They were looking for something, or maybe leaving something. I checked the yard at sunrise, every inch of it. That's when I found it wedged under the edge of my back fence, wrapped in plastic. A burner phone, no text, no contacts, just one photo in the gallery. It was grainy, but clear enough. A shot of me talking to Ray on his porch 2 days earlier. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a bluff anymore. Karen's operation had eyes, and they were watching everyone I talked to. I called Ray immediately, but it rang through. Then straight to voicemail. The twist. I drove to his place, porch light on. Mail piling up. No answer? But something about the air felt wrong, to quiet, to still. I checked his side gate, walked around back, and found the screen door slightly open. Inside, nothing looked ransacked. No signs of a struggle. But Ray was gone. That's when I realized this was bigger than just Karen playing neighborhood tyrant. Someone was helping her clean up loose ends. And fast. I checked the phone again and found one clue I missed, a deleted voicemail that was only partially recovered. Just 4 words. Ray's voice, low and shaken. It's not just her. That cracked the whole thing wide open. Karen might have been the face of this fake HOA scheme, but someone else, maybe multiple people, were behind it, working in the shadows. The fake fines, the threats, the intimidation, it was all part of something more organized. That night, as I backed up all the files to a secure drive, headlights flared through my front window. A black SUV I didn't recognize idled across the street. No one got out, no one moved, and it didn't leave. I didn't wait for the SUV to make a move. I grabbed my badge, my backup drive, and stepped outside with steady hands. Windows were tinted, engine humming low. I flashed my badge toward the windshield. The driver didn't move at first, but then, slowly, the window rolled down just enough for a voice to slip out. "You've been busy." It was a man's voice, calm, like he was used to talking under pressure. "You want to live here in peace, right? Then shut it down." I didn't respond. Just stared until the SUV pulled away, disappearing around the corner without a taillight flicker. But that was all I needed. I called in my contact at the agency, told him everything about the burner phone, Ray's disappearance, the shell companies, even the car that just left. Within the hour, a quiet investigation was greenlit. Over the next week, we worked carefully. Pulled surveillance, ran property records, and finally got a warrant. What we found was bigger than I'd imagined. Karen had been used, whether willingly or not, by a small group of local developers trying to inflate land values through intimidation and fake HOAs. That utility parcel, they'd been funneling community maintenance funds into a hidden account tied to a company owned by Tom. Ray turned up 2 towns over, shaken but safe. They'd threatened him, told him to disappear or else. But now, with law enforcement involved, he was finally willing to speak. His testimony, along with the footage and records, gave us everything we needed. Karen was arrested, along with Tom and 2 others tied to the LLC. The neighborhood started to breathe again. People were talking freely. The fear? Gone. But here's the twist. A month later, after everything settled down, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, an aerial shot of my house. On the back, written in red ink, "This neighborhood was never yours to protect." So yeah, the fake HOA is gone. But something tells me the people behind it aren't finished yet. After that letter, I kept my guard up. Cameras stayed on, lights stayed bright, and I made sure local law enforcement had copies of everything I'd collected. But weeks passed and nothing else happened. No strange cars. No new threats. It was like the storm had finally passed. So, maybe just moved to quieter ground. Either way, the fake HOA was dismantled. The county officially recognized the neighborhood as independent, with no HOA obligations tied to the properties. Karen was facing charges for fraud, harassment, and conspiracy. Along with Tom and the others who thought they could manipulate the system, Ray returned home and was welcomed back by neighbors, who now realized just how deep the lies had gone. Slowly, the community began rebuilding trust. People started mowing each other's lawns again, waving without hesitation. And for the first time since I moved in, it actually felt like a neighborhood worth protecting. As for me, I stayed. I thought about leaving, starting fresh, somewhere quieter. But in the end, that would have been giving them the last word. Instead, I took the experience as a reminder. Not all battles are loud. And sometimes the ones fought with fake fines and fake authority are just as damaging as the obvious ones. The biggest takeaway: always read the fine print before you move in, and never be afraid to question what doesn't feel right. HOAs can be helpful, but when they're used as a cover for control or profit, they stop being about community and start becoming a threat. So, yeah, Karen thought she had the power. She thought fear and paperwork could keep people silent. But in the end, truth spoke louder. And sometimes the quiet neighbor next door just happens to carry a badge.